Welcome to it, Hockey Talk Show on this Wednesday, December 20th. As you can tell by the title on Facebook and YouTube Live, we are discussing the New York Islanders' huge news today. We talked about it, I feel like, for a couple of shows now. We had Randy Marshall on from Newsday. She was spectacular at outlining everything for us. Back then we thought, well, the decision will come in a couple of months. And then, well, maybe it'll come in 3 weeks. And then, oh boy, we're getting a decision this week. And now here we are Wednesday, and Governor Cuomo made the announcement this morning. And not only are we going to get some reaction here and discuss the arena and everything involved around it, but we are also going to get a first look at where the Islanders are going to call their home. We have some artist renderings to go over on the new Belmont Arena, and I am excited to tackle all of this. Drop some comments in the Facebook and YouTube chats so I know you guys are there. Remember to hit that like button so we know how many people are watching the Hockey Talk Show. If you're listening on the podcast, thanks so much for doing that. Remember to rate and review. You know, we're not really big on guests on this show. It's really more of an interaction between you and I, just talking hockey. But I felt the need tonight to go to somebody who knows a whole ton about the Islanders. Pretty big fan of his work and the Isles blog. We bring in Joey Bono. Joey B, what's going on, my man? How are you?
Hey, Anthony, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty good. Now, you're the man behind the Isles blog, correct?
That is true, yes.
Genius behind the Isles blog. I've been watching your stuff for a while, listening, reading. Actually, not listening all that often, but reading a lot. Twitter a whole bunch. And then the podcast I just caught this morning, you had Jim Bombach on. That was a really good show,
yep.
Man.
Yeah, we've been fortunate enough to have Jim on a few different times whenever there's been a lot of significant news. Back, in the summer of last year, then he had the news about the specifics around the opt-out between the Islanders and Barclays Center, where it became quite apparent that before this year was going to be out, one side was going to opt out of the deal. And then we had him on a few weeks ago as the RFP kind of came down, and it really became Belmont or bust, and was lucky enough to get him on after he broke the story on Tuesday night.
All right, so now for the folks that are watching me and are unaware of you, because we sort of cover the whole league and nationally, and your focus is on the Islanders. How long has the blog been around? How long has the podcast been around? I feel like, is that relatively new, or did I just catch on late on the podcast?
We've been doing the podcast for 3 years, a couple different iterations. The website, nyilesblog.com, and Ilesblog, the Twitter account, was actually run originally by Connor Moore, who now writes some Islanders hockey for Barstool Sports. And I came on doing specifically podcasts and occasional columnists for him, but then took over pretty much all facets of it before the 2015-2016 season.
All right, so cool. So you're intimately involved in everything. I know I actually get some news from you guys on, sometimes I'm going through my feed and you guys are breaking the news to me first, beating out the likes of Chris Botta and Arthur Staple. So you guys do a really good job. So give me your impression now. There was a big press conference there. Did you see it? Were you there, or you just saw it? Give me your impression of today.
I watched the press conference live from Elmont in Belmont Park, and obviously, as you mentioned, Governor Cuomo was there. Andrew Cuomo making the announcement along with John Ledecky, some other Long Island, Nassau County politicians and people that are involved in the Belmont RFP process. Islander players were there, John Tavares, Cal Clutterbuck. And, for Islander fans, this is monumental. I'll be curious to know how big this plays out, although it did get national attention from a lot of the NHL writers. But you can go as far back as, even the 80s, as people felt that the Nassau Coliseum needed to be renovated. There's stories that Islander beat reporters have documented about leaky roofs and falling down on them in the press box in the late 90s. And then, in 2011, there was a referendum that the taxpayers of Nassau County had to vote to say whether or not they were going to build or renovate, refurbish the Coliseum for about $400 million or not. And they voted that down 57% to 43%. The Islanders were kind of left in limbo. Their lease was up in a number of years. And then that's how Barclays Center came to be. But from the very start, it was an imperfect fit. And as I mentioned before, as soon as we learned that the ironclad 25-year lease that we originally thought was the case that was originally reported wasn't in fact the case, and that there was an opt-out, it made sense that John Ledecky and Scott Malkin, the Islander majority owners, would be looking elsewhere. And to build another new arena in the New York metropolitan area is quite a magnificent feat, and for a fan base that's longed for this now for probably the better part of 2 decades. This was an emotional thing for them, because there's always been that worry that this team might relocate outside of the tri-state area, and now that worry is gone for at least the next 49 years, as they said today.
Yeah, nobody wanted to root for the Kansas City Islanders. Also, I do want to point out that Billy Joel was there today. I want to make sure we cover that.
Yes,
I don't want.
He closed down the Coliseum. He opened up NYCB Live, which is the refurbished Coliseum. Closed down Shea Stadium a number of years. And Andrew Cuomo was already putting the screws to him to make sure he's the first act when that arena opens up, hopefully in 3 years' time, although we don't know the specifics just quite yet. Yeah,
well, I wanted to make sure we mentioned that Billy was there, because if not, we'd get our Long Island licenses revoked. We wouldn't be able to live here no more. Yeah, I wonder if he'll I'm pretty sure he'll probably do the first show there. He does the first show everywhere. You know, like you said, he closes them, he opens them, Billy does not just wine bottles, arenas too. He does them all. That's what's good about Billy Joel. You know, it's funny too. I was watching I watched the press conference too. I thought it was fantastic. Call me crazy here, but is Scott Malkin and Jonathan Ledecky, are these guys Scott more than Jonathan? Or who's the guy who's always out in front of everything? Is that Jonathan or Scott?
That's John Ledecky. He's much more the personal face of ownership at the moment. Yes.
Right. Now, all right. So now I was okay. And back, by the way, back to your story about the Coliseum falling down. Now, I worked for the team for 2-3 years, and I personally had leakage on me from the Nassau Coliseum, which was like a badge of honor. You know, you roam those hallways and all of a sudden, like, why is my shirt soaking wet? Oh, yeah, that's right, because everything is leaking here. And the creepiest part about it was it hadn't rained in like 14 days. So that was what was really just disturbing about that whole experience.
It might not have been water.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But anyway, is it me or is Jonathan Ledecky? Now, I went through Charles, and I honestly feel that Charles did everything he could do. You know, as we said, Barclays wasn't the ideal, but I think he did what he needed to do to keep the franchise in this area and not in Quebec or Kansas City or, you know, wherever. But I watched that Jonathan's reaction, and I'm going to play some of it here after we let you go. Is he not the best owner that you have ever seen? I mean, I don't know if I'm romantic about it or just happy about what's happening, but every one of his answers today and leading up to today is exactly what should be said.
He's pretty much been that way since the first day he took over majority ownership. Obviously, always interacting with the fans. He held a town hall meeting the summer before his first year as majority owner. He's ridden the train with Islander fans on the LIRR. He would stop and have conversations on the concourse. This is a guy that was a minority owner with the Washington Capitals. He's the uncle to Katie Ledecky, arguably one of the best swimmers in the history of Olympic swimming for the United States. He was down in Brazil rooting her on. So he certainly has been out there and has said as much as he possibly could to say to fans when they've questioned him. Obviously that they were in a lease with Barclays Center and he couldn't always say too much. You know, he has been a godsend to this organization. And you said about Charles Long, it's a complicated history with the Islanders because when he came, I think there were big expectations because he was a local guy. Yes, he didn't know hockey, but he had deep wallets and they made some additional early moves. Alexei Yashin, Michael Pekka back with Peter Laviolette led in that team in 2001, 2002, making the playoffs for the first time in 7 years. But after a while, he stopped investing in the team in terms of salary cap, and the team went through a lot of very, very lean years because all of his emphasis and all of his energy was really put towards the Lighthouse project and a much brand new development project around Nassau Coliseum, which never happened. So there's mixed reactions on Charles Wang, but certainly another owner might have moved them outside the metropolitan area, and he did not do that with the move to Brooklyn.
Yeah, and I also want to give him credit, and I forget if I heard this I think Jim said it actually this morning on your podcast, which is great. We're talking with Joey B over at Isles Blog. They're on Facebook and everywhere else. We'll put links up on our channel here. He mentioned that, Charles did put the lease together. And by the way, it was a genius lease. I mean, let's be honest with each other. It was pure genius. I mean, the fact that he got 25 years out of it, the rumored $50 million a year, and then had those out clauses in there. If the team got sold, those would kick in. That clearly worked in his favor. So one could argue that Charles really, in a defunct way, sort of was the architect for all of this. Now, I mean, it was a 1 in a million shot. It went, if this was his plan from the get-go, but at least he left the new owners with options. So I do want to leave that out there. I also said last night on last night's show that I like the little, I forget the area they're calling it, where they're going to allow for input from the Elmont folks, because I thought that was a little nod to Charles. Because if you look at the Lighthouse Project, and I was working for the team at the time, there was a lot of community-based, whether it was offices or retail space, sure, but they wanted like sports medicine stuff, and they were really trying to do something for the community. So the fact that little nugget got in there as well, I thought was a little nod to Charles. But the question I really want to ask you, Joe, is sure. Now I was looking over some of and of course I know Islander fans get angry, maybe a little bit more angry than most. But people were disappointed by John Tavares' comments. Again, I'm going to play them after you go. But he said what I expected him to say, which was it was great. It doesn't mean he's going to sign tomorrow. I mean, I think people were expecting him to sign today, as part of the announcement, which I thought would have been a mistake anyway. But how do you feel about his comments, and where do you think this leaves him and the team?
Yeah, well, I think if you go back a couple of years, people expected the Islanders to want to re-sign Tavares before the start of this season, during this offseason, that it'd be too big of a risk to play this year, his final year of his contract, without him signing that long-term deal. We found out very early on in the offseason that was not going to happen. So fans started to get apprehensive about it, and then everyone heard that it was arena certainty what John Tavares was most after, meaning that he needed to know where this team was going to be playing.
Which, by the way, and I hate to interrupt you, but I never bought that for a second. Did you? Did you think it was arena certainty that was the issue?
I think it's an element to it. I mean, certainly I think the team has a better chance of being more competitive and being a more attractive location for free agents and players in general if they have a state-of-the-art brand new arena instead of this imperfect situation at Barclays Center where a lot of the players live on Long Island. That's where the practice facility is, and they have these kind of awkward commutes by train or by cab into the city, into Brooklyn each day. I didn't feel it was the be-all, end-all. I think it's a lot of different factors, including how the team plays the rest of the season, whether or not he feels they're in the right direction. And this just may not, be done during the season. I don't think they've completely ruled that out. But I think Islander fans have to get prepared for a situation where, you could be sitting there on, June 29th, June 30th, approaching free agency on July 1st. And just like Steven Stamkos, that this goes down really to the very end. He certainly knows he can get whatever money he wants from the Islanders. He really enjoys Long Island. He's a very loyal guy. He's a very prideful guy. He wants to win in a place where he's the face of the franchise. So Islander fans shouldn't be really dismayed with anything he said today. He never really gives you too much in the interview. He's very matter-of-fact. He's very guarded when he speaks. He didn't give me any indication of anything but that, he's still weighing all options, but this was one big domino to fall for him. The fact that he decides to sign an 8-year, $84 million contract, about 5-6 of those years will be played at Belmont.
Yeah, see, I think for more for me, I thought it was the team. I thought, the Matt Molsons, the Vaneks, the Stromes, the misses, the things that never really worked out. I thought to me it was more like, is this team going to go or not? Sure. And I mean, now listen, right now, they're having their problems on defense. They're having their problems certainly in goal. Thomas Greiss has really struggled mightily this season. They have the worst goals against average in the league. But he's playing on one of the most dynamic lines in hockey right now. Him, Anders Lee, Josh Bailey are scoring a ton of points together, among the most formidable lines in hockey, probably the best line he's played with. And he had a period of time where he played with Thomas Vanek and Kyle Oposo, where they played great before his injury in the Olympics, if you recall.
And then Vanek was then subsequently traded. But this is the best line he's been on since. And then Matthew Barzal is a special player. He's looking towards the future, that you have a 20-year-old that might win Rookie of the Year, that's going to be a second line center for your team. So a lot of positives, I think, overall. And, so right now for Islander fans, there's two questions. Is Tavares going to sign? And then the question is, where do they play after next season? A lot of people, even politicians, are trying to get them to play at least some games back at the Coliseum while Belmont is built. That's really the next big story that's going to break on Long Island as to where does this team play while this arena gets built, because a lot of people don't want them in Barcelona, including the people that run that arena.
Yeah, and I think this is a no-brainer. They've been saying nice enough things. I think they wind up in the Coliseum for a year or two while they're built. I don't think that's going to be as suspenseful as people think. I know, I think it was Jim on your podcast said Joe and Evan on the Fan were talking about Hartford. Just that's absurd and ridiculous. They'll be at the Coliseum.
That won't happen.
Yeah, it worked for the preseason, and it was great, and it'll work for the time being, especially since there's still, Brett Yormark. There's still some good-natured, there's still some good feelings there between the two.
I think it's really a matter of what the NHL wants to do and whether or not they would approve it. I think Islander fans, they got to have a negotiation right now. So there has to be a new negotiation between Barclays and the Islanders, because the Islanders will opt out of the contract, and that has to happen pretty shortly. So we'll find out, I think, relatively quickly whether or not they just give an extension to the time period for negotiations. I think most likely the Islanders play a full season at Barclays next year, but then after that, we'll see what happens. Barclays people want them out there. Politicians want them out there. A lot of fans do. But I think the Islanders want the best possible deal financially for them. And Bettman's putting up a position, and so is John Ledecky publicly, that, it's going to cost Barclays a little bit of money if they want to have their team to play either split games or a full season out at an arena that's only going to sit 13,500 people and has subpar dressing rooms currently, and other types of imperfections.
Yeah, but Billy Joel is going to come play before the game, so it'll be fine. They'll work it out. All right, Joe, I know we got to let you go. So last question. John Tavares re-signs shortly or before July 1st. What is the bigger responsibility for that, Matthew Barzal or the Belmont Arena?
I think the Belmont Arena is more responsible, because, they could have had a good team even without Matt Barzal. I felt that the only way I would ever entertain even trading Tavares would be if Belmont didn't happen and the team fell apart, meaning that they weren't in playoff contention. If he was sitting there at the trade deadline with a team not making the playoffs and no Belmont Arena, I would have listened to every single offer. Now that Belmont's there, this team is most likely going to be in the playoffs, or certainly in contention come March. I think he sticks around. I think he ultimately re-signs, and Islander fans can they'll have to pinch themselves if too many good things happen to them all at one time between the arena and their franchise player re-signing. But I think that's the most likely road we're heading down.
Well, I staunchly disagree with you. I think it's Matthew Barzal, but I'll tell you what, we could argue next time you come on the show with us.
You got it. Thank you, Anthony.
Joe, it was a pleasure, man.
Take care.
All right, there goes Joey B from Isles blog. Do a fantastic job of writing about the team. Part of the reason why we went to I decided to actually do this show is because I'm involved in media and I can see the landscape and where it's at. And, most people haven't caught on yet, but I think a lot of people have, where blogs, Facebook Live, YouTube shows, podcasts, more people are, getting their information and accessing their information through these means more so than print, television. For instance, this show was literally born out of the fact that there's not a lot of live hockey discussion to consume. I can listen to podcasts a ton, and I do. I could watch NHL Network, and I do, and all that. But the ability to read a comment, react back to it, you give me your feedback, I give you mine, doesn't really exist. So that's how the show is born. And blogs have become, and Twitter has become so much more accessible than even just going to newspaper websites anymore. I still think there's a place for newspapers. I think that the way newspapers are distributed will change, much like radio and podcasts. Again, on my radio show, which is on the FM dial, I say this a whole ton of times, that you won't be tuning into that show on the FM dial in the future, you'll be listening to the same show that I do now. The only difference is you'll be on an app, whether the app is on your phone or in your Apple CarPlay or Google Car, or whatever it is. You'll press an app button and you'll be able to access the show, So I'm a strong believer in that. And the more I hunger to consume hockey content, the more I find these great guys. And for the Islanders, at least, and there's a lot of others. Maybe one day we'll run through the list of all the ones that I love. Isles blog is certainly a good one. Brian Compton is incomparable, the incomparable Compton. He does a phenomenal job. A lot of Islander stuff, but he also writes for NHL.com, so you do get a lot of coverage there. Arthur Staple does great for the Isles. Chris Bada, who I mentioned on yesterday's show, does great for the Isles. So there's a lot of great bloggers and podcasts to choose from if you want to, gain some more content. I mean, I wish you only listen to and watch this show, but I'm very realistic and realize that there are a lot of great people out there doing some great things. And Joey B was one of them. Reached out to him today to see if he wanted to come on, and he agreed, which I thought was very, very nice of him to do. And I certainly do appreciate that. And I thought he gave us some nice little opinions on everything that's going on with the Islanders situation. So what do you say we get a closer look at the arena? First look at the new Belmont Arena here that they plan on constructing on Long Island. We'll bring this up for you here. This is artist renderings taken straight from the Islanders Facebook page. New York Arena partners, Sterling and Ledecky and James Dolan and everybody getting into the mix of things. By the way, and maybe we'll link it here in the video, but I did a really comprehensive review of what the arena means for the area from a business and music standpoint. That's sort of how I covered it on the morning show that I do on WEHM radio this morning, because they care a little bit more about music than hockey. So I analyzed it from that, and it's kind of interesting where you have the Mets, the New York Mets involved, and you have the New York Rangers and Knicks involved with James Dolan all working together with the Islanders. And there's a lot of significance to that, and it has to do with competing with the Barclays Center. So if you want to check out that video, we'll put a link in here, and you guys can certainly see that. We got really in-depth on that, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want to focus this up on hockey. So here's an artist rendering of the inside of the arena. First thing I notice right off the bat here is it is huge. It is very, very huge. Now, I know that a lot of this can change. These are just renderings. These are not blueprints, but this is a big building. You can tell. I mean, 18,000 seats, we knew it would be. But a couple things I notice here. Whoops, sorry about that. I noticed a special sort of sectioned off area right here. This looks a little bit different than some of the other seats. That doesn't mirror the other side of this. You can see the penalty box on this side. Team benches are on this side. And there's some sort of special row seating down here. There's just something bizarre about this little spot right here where this is all sort of broken up from the rest and doesn't appear to be the same on the other side. I mean, maybe it could be. This might be just the entrances from the bottom here. But I don't know. This looks a little bit different for me with the way the seating is. It is an interesting take on an arena, and I don't think I've ever seen this before, where you have an entrance on the floor, yet still have some seats in front of it. Not really something that happens with hockey all that often. Usually that's really reserved for, that first level is reserved for players and whatnot. So that'll be interesting to see. I know that has changed a little bit, especially with Edmonton. They have an interesting way to get in and out of the arena. In fact, you can see the players literally have to walk through the crowd to get through to the arena, which I think is interesting. So maybe they're working out something like that, especially on this side. As you can see, there's all these entrances here. But I think it's kind of a new feature and sort of a brilliant move to keep seating on the boards on the ice and still have some access for people who are sitting all the way down low. I noticed the lower bowl is very, very large, which is pretty significant too, because a lot of these arenas now are not so far back. They're all kind of a little bit more with a sharper slant to them. So you're more on top of the action and close to the action. But what happens is your higher seats then are like super far away and can be really inconvenient for watching a game. So I picked up on that. Interesting that there's not a row of, or maybe there is. It's kind of hard to see. I guess we really don't have a great view of it, but a lot of arenas have, you know, some suites down here at the top of that first bowl level. And from what I can tell, there's just suites all around this ring right here. But it's hard to see what this is. I don't know if this is, you know, viewable area as you're walking through the concourse so that you can still see the ice. I know that's a popular move that started in baseball stadiums. Citi Field is like that, and a lot of the newer stadiums are like that. It'd be interesting to see if they can incorporate that inside the arena setting, or if this is actually going to be somewhat of a party deck, you know, party suite area, and these will be more like private, smaller suites. I don't know. A lot of arenas have posts up. If you take a look at the Gaylord Entertainment Center down in Nashville, Minnesota, Arizona, there's these huge posts in the corner of the arenas. I can see something here. It looks like speakers up at the top. I don't know if there'll be that post-like atmosphere there, or if the seats will go all the way around. It kind of looks like the seats go all the way around. It definitely looks like that over here. And if you notice some of the gray area up over here behind the seats, just shows how vast and big this arena looks like it's actually going to be. Here's some outside renderings. I mean, that's really, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can tackle on the inside. Not really. I mean, it looks like a huge scoreboard. It's interesting that they have it wrapping all the way around. I don't know if I've ever seen a scoreboard like that. The Garden board looks similar to this, but not. This looks like the Tampa scoreboard, but just it's continuous instead of boxy. So that'll be interesting to see if new technology will pull that off. Here's an outside rendering of the area. This would be the Cross Island Parkway over here, and this would be Hempstead Turnpike. Notice the big Belmont writing out here. What I did notice about this right off the bat, first thing that caught my eye is the glass. There looks like there's a ton of glass, and even glass sort of encapsulating what would be outside area, which I think is a smart move, because that's kind of what you want. Come rain or whatever, you know, you'll still have the feeling like you're outside, but you'll be covered from the elements. If it snows or whatever the case, I do worry though, because we do. I mean, that should be some pretty impressive glass, because we do get a good amount of snow here. You know, you get a 2-3 foot snow. I'm sure they're going to build glass that'll take it, but still, that is something to think about. This right here looks like it's going to be the proposed hotel, and this will be the LIRR station right here. So as you can see, it's all encapsulated. And think about if you could walk from one to the other, you know, and not have to worry about an umbrella or rain or anything like that. That is really, you know, when they talk about fan experience and making these arenas nice, you know, that's one thing to consider. New Yorkers do not like carrying umbrellas with them. And if somebody's going to take the train in from the city or from out east, you know, it's easy to run from your car right into the train and then not have to worry about carrying anything with you, holding an umbrella for the rest of the night. So, you know, having enclosure all the way through to the arena it's a tiny little detail, but it's a nice thing when you're actually in it and you're experiencing the arena. That's fan experience. And, you know, the better places take all these little variables into account. You know, how are the fans going to be going to this? And that's the difference between arenas now and 30, 40 years ago. They were more worried about revenue and you know, just building it. And there was not the science behind actually enhancing this for the players, for the fans, I should say. And that is definitely something to think about. So a lot of glass enclosure. This looks like it's all going to be the retail space. And I believe there's going to be some glass above that too. This looks like it's going to be some sort of a concourse or an entrance. We'll buzz a little further. Here's the view from the Cross Island Parkway. Again, that hotel looks like it's going to be pretty huge and definitely going to change the skyline of the area. And if you're not familiar with Long Island whatsoever, we really have no skyline. Manhattan has all the skyline we all really need. And that was always the problem with the Lighthouse project too, was that huge hotel, and it looks like they're going to get it now over there in Belmont, and this will be super great come Belmont Stakes time too. And I'm sure, you know, just judging by how this is laid out, I'm sure there'll be a view of you can kind of get a better look here if you're booking on this side, get a nice view of the track. Of course, it'll be blocked a little bit by the grandstand, but still, I bet you those track view rooms will go for a pretty penny, a little bit more than the arena view rooms. as we take a look at the overall project there. So yeah, there you go. This shooting up in the sky, changing the skyline a little bit of the area, and the big Belmont letters. I'm sure that'll be a sponsor at some point. This will be the NYCB Live Belmont Park Arena or some craziness. But I do find that this is interesting. It looks like there's some sort of a window here. I wonder if they're thinking restaurant or, you know, I don't know what they're thinking, but it looks like this is several levels and just views of the parkway, which would be a pretty sweet thing. Really excited about this. Definitely and more close to the arena inside look at what this is going to be like. You can see the Islander banners hanging. Again, glass enclosure above. Looks like glass all on the side. I would assume that this would be the arena right here. They have a little market there. So again, you know, sort of building this little sort of city, this little attraction, is a really interesting concept, something that we don't really have in New York, something that's a little bit difficult to do. You know, I mean, Madison Square Garden doesn't need this because it's in smack in the middle of Manhattan. You can get a beer across the street, you can get a burger anywhere, you know, trains, everything is super convenient. So whereas other NHL cities, you know, like Nashville or and I'm trying to think of ones that have really good fan experiences. Believe it or not, Los Angeles, because it's not built like New York, they had to sort of do this in Los Angeles. But to have that closeness there, those markets and bars and restaurants and interesting experiences, that's something that we see all across the country that we don't really see in New York, because a lot of that is sort of built in anyway in Manhattan, at least. And, you know, you go to a Devils game, not exactly like that. And, you know, when you went to the Nassau Coliseum, I mean, there was nothing around but parking lots. You know, it was a good 10-minute walk from the door of the Coliseum to the closest place to eat, and that was a deli across the street, which was quite lovely, but not exactly what you want before a game. You know, you want a good meal sometimes, or a burger or something like that. And the Coliseum had a few options, but seating was very limited. This looks like there'll be plenty of opportunity for people to have a nice experience. You know, something that you knock off work at 5 and you get there at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and you waste an hour having some drinks or some food, you know, before the game, or you go on a Tuesday afternoon and you have some lunch there and whatever, and you stick around, do some shopping, and then hang for the game a little bit later on. So all things to think about, but it looks like they really thought this through. Again, here's another look at the arena. Now, this is in a concert setting, obviously. We get a better look at the bottom here, which looks like these are just vomitoriums, little entrances to get in, so nothing maybe too special. It looked a little different in the other sketch. I did notice here that there looks like, you know, with the stage coming up, it's hard. There's lights and everything. I don't know if this is just an artist rendering, or they, you know, they just didn't put too much detail in the back, or it would be, you know, curtained off. But it looks like it sort of stops to one side, which I find to be pretty interesting. And it looks like they're definitely able to remove a lot of the seating back here, if not fully remove it, or just maybe they just artist rendering didn't finish it. But again, look at the vastness of the arena. It looks like it's going to be pretty big and pretty impressive. This to me looks like a shot from the LIRR station. That was a big part of the proposal, them trying to make this a full-time station over there, and a look for the arena from the station. I guess there'll be some walkways, and again, there you'll be able to walk over the trains and get the different lines. And it looks like, you know, looks like 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 stories of restaurants or markets or cafes or bars or whatever on the way to the arena. Pretty interesting stuff here. Again, another look. I'm guessing this would be sort of from that concourse. You can see here they got a mock-up Brewtown, a little bar area, Slapshot. You know, I guess that's like a restaurant. And again, all enclosed, but really nice. I don't know about you, but I love trees, you know, in an enclosed area. I still love that when they did that in the malls in the 80s. That was always, I always like feeling like I'm outside, but being inside in climate control. That's for me. 2-story entrance here. It looks like, well, not entrance, but 2-story entrance, you know, looking at the Islanders. And there's Islander logos. I thought these were watermarks earlier, but I'm starting to think now there might be some sort of a glass art that, you know, maybe some early ideas to be hanging down. But yeah, I mean, that looks like what the entrance would be for the arena if you're coming from the LIRR station. So this to me looks like the paddock area. And this would be the other side of the Cross Island Parkway view. And there's the arena back there. And again, the horses in the paddock. And then it's some more of the retail shops. So, I mean, really tying it all in together, the racetrack and the arena and the retail. It feels like this would really be made into a year-round destination, which is entirely what they're trying to be. There you can see the North Entertainment Plaza that we were looking at, a little concourse here on the side. And then there would be the paddock, that view that we just got, again, opposite the cross island over there. And I think that's, oh, here's one more shot. I'm guessing this would be the road closest to the arena inside of the cross island. So that looks pretty cool. And we leave it there for you with the inside of the arena view. Overall, the few things I really thought that were nice about the arena, and that, you know, everybody can get excited about, not just Islander fans, is that, and Scott, Jonathan Ledecky brought this up, this will be the first third generation of arenas, which I found to be pretty interesting, because when you think about some of the older new arenas that came into the mix, I mean, even, you know, what you consider to be a new arena, Nashville, is 20 years old already. You know, that arena is 20 years old already. And I mean, I still feel, and especially because they went to the Cup, that Nashville is just getting started, you know. But when you look at like Tampa Bay, for instance, or, you know, Dallas, or, you know, some of these arenas that were brand spanking new at the time, 20, 30 years ago, are now becoming the elder statesmen of the league. I mean, it was one thing when the Coliseum and the Joe was still around. You know, those were the elder statesmen. Once those two closed, you know, now you started, I mean, literally, you started looking at Tampa. I mean, 93, it's, you know, 25 years old. 92, 93, that's, it's 25 years old already. Tampa, you know, San Jose, you know, some of these arenas, the Bell Center in Montreal, or is it the Molson Center now? I can't keep track of the stupid sponsors. You know, some of these buildings that were like new and modern and unique at the time, and now you look at them and you're like, holy cow, these are 20, 25, 30 years old at this point. So, you know, you had all the original arenas, then you had the new wave of arenas, which came in with the last one really being Little Caesars. And now you have a point where all these teams have gotten new buildings, sans like Calgary, and there's a few. They've all gotten new buildings. And so the Islanders, and they literally went around and toured and took a look all around to see. And, you know, they were able to grab the best elements out of them. So I really feel like this is a new chapter, if you will, in the world of NHL arenas. You know, it really is a new sort of take, a new chapter on where the league is going to be going from here, because, you know, sooner than later, people are going to talk about, well, Tampa needs a new arena now, and, you know, this and that. And, you know, they're going to start building off of the arena that's going to be in Belmont more than any other. So I found that to be pretty interesting. And I like the positioning, again, as somebody who's in radio and marketing. I like that they took the time to, you know, sort of coin that phrase, caption it as, you know, this is going to be the third generation building. We're taking everything, all of it, from Montreal to Detroit, you know, Dallas to Nashville, taking it all in and seeing what's the best experience. And by the way, John Ledecky, I'll give him credit. He really did do the work. I mean, I was reading all that stuff about how, you know, he went from building to building to building and sat with fans. And by the way, took subways to those buildings, took Ubers, took cabs, you know, didn't, you know, come in his own limousine or any crazy thing that people think rich people do, which they really don't. But he really put in all the work to see what was the best. He was also at the same time trying to figure out how other organizations ran. For a long time, rumor that there would be a president being hired and that they would oversee Garth Snow, but that eventually didn't happen. But he really put in the work, and I think that what we're going to get here with the Oakview group especially involved, and, you know, James Dolan and the Garden being involved in the renovations that the Garden just went through, I think you're going to get the top-notch facility that any franchise would dream of. And it's kind of crazy that the Islanders are getting it, because for the longest time, nobody thought they were getting anything. Josh, wow, when I went to the Tampa game, that arena looked pretty new. Must age well, not like the Coliseum or the Brendan Byrne Arena. I don't think anybody wants the words Brendan Byrne Arena uttered in the arena industry. That was a that was an awful arena. That ceiling, the sound in there, everything stunk in that building. I saw a couple games in there. The games weren't horrible, but the Rock is nice now. Again, has that steep issue, which gets me excited about seeing the incline there. You know, you may be a little bit farther back when you're all the way to the back, but I would much rather that than feel like I'm so high and on top of it. I was never really crazy about that, to be honest with you. And the Coliseum sloped a little bit more. The gradient was a little bit more gradual, and I always thought that was better. I always thought, and the sight lines at the Coliseum were phenomenal. They really, really were. I mean, they were great. Now you can't maintain those and have 18,000 seats. That's the issue. Which is why all these buildings have these swooping, steep, gradients. But we'll see what they come up with this one. Again, they learn every time they do one of these things. So, and you got the top-notch people on it, architects and everything else like that. So, be really interesting to see what they have. Yeah, it's crazy to think, but Amalie Arena, I think they call it now. I always remember it as the St. Pete Times Forum. But yeah, that's Tampa came into the league. Well, Tampa came into the league in 92, 93, and they did have a couple of seasons before they actually moved in there, so maybe a little bit less than 25 years old. But still, when you think about, going back to what Joey B said, when you think about, oh, the Islanders need a new building, I mean, that kind of talk was happening in 94. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, 72, it opens, come 94, 22, 23, 25 years later, they start talking about, and again, it came from a time where they did not pay as much attention in arenas as they do now. It was just great to have it, not have the best thing that you can have. You started hearing those rumblings then, and then for like 15 more years, you heard those rumblings. So, the Coliseum at 25 years old looked a hell of a lot older than these newer buildings look at 25 years old, if that makes any sense. And I think they'll last a little longer. In fact, Eugene Melnick, when we played his clips the other day, you heard him say that, you built a building back when Ottawa was built, for instance, and the building was expected to last 25, 30 years, like a roof. The buildings they're building now, Little Caesars, they're expecting to last 50 years. Whether they'll do that or not, we'll see. I don't know if really owners and municipalities can really afford to redo buildings every 25 years. I don't think that'll happen. I think that the way they build them in technology will just get better, so I think that they won't have to build them for 25 years. Again, if you look at the Garden or you look at Montreal, I know that's gone through a little bit of cosmetic work. The TD Garden in Boston, there's another one. That was a new arena at the time, and now you go back and you look at it, and I think mid-90s that came into the league. So again, there's another one that's circling that 20, 25-year mark. And I think they've done a little bit of renovating in there as well. Those newer buildings, they give you a little bit more flexibility, Josh, my father had season tickets to the Devils in that arena. As a kid, I liked it because that's all I really knew. Sentimental value. Josh, truer words never spoken, man. And I hope you don't take my words as unkind, but I felt the same exact way with the New York Islanders. Even going to the Garden pre-reno, I always kind of felt like, meh, I like the Coliseum better, And then when I went to the Rock for the first time and I walked in and I was able to see the ice from when I walked in, I was like, oh. And then when I had to go to the bathroom in the intermission and there were 400 stalls and I didn't have to wait on a line, because in the Coliseum, you left with a minute left, and then you got back with, missing the 3 minutes of the next period because you were just waiting online to use the bathroom. Okay. And then when I went there and I was like, oh, it doesn't have to be that way. And I didn't have to wait on a 45-minute line for chicken fingers, and so like your eyes, like it's all, it's like being in an abusive relationship. Josh, I hate to tell you this, but you, my friend, you were in an abusive relationship, as was I with the Coliseum. We didn't get, then you go out with the next person and you're like, oh my God, You mean this is the way it really is supposed to be? Same thing with the baseball stadiums. You know, I grew up with Shea Stadium. That was my stadium. That's all I knew. I went to Yankee Stadium a little bit, but I went to Shea Stadium. And then when they built Citi Field, I was like, oh, you mean this is how it is? You mean I don't need old, dried up, rubbery shoe chicken fingers? I can have a Shake Shack burger or a lobster roll if I want. Like, is this what people are doing? Like, do you remember when they built Arizona and they had a pool in the outfield and you were like, wow, that's crazy. But never in your wildest dreams did you imagine that it would come to your stadium or arena. And then next thing you knew, new Yankee Stadium, new Citi Field, and all this stuff. And now you're like, oh, wow, this is how it's supposed. It is supposed to be a fan experience. If you're going to ask fans to shell out $400 or $500 to bring a family of four to one game, then you better make it a damn good experience. You better have everything. And that's what these arenas are trying to do. A lot of Isles talk. Apologize for that. But it's two things. One, this is a gigantic story. And two, there's really not much else going on in the league right now. All is quiet. All is really, really quiet. Trade deadline is in effect. A couple of people chiming in on the John Tavares thing. And Darren Drager believes the future of this organization in terms of their home was pretty high on the list of Tavares criteria. He feels this news bodes well for Tavares potentially staying here long term. I think it's more of an ego thing for Tavares. I think it's more of he wanted to see where he was able to bring this franchise and how it ranks. If he wasn't able to get this done, and he had nothing to do with it other than his play on the ice, but it's exactly that. Stars feel this way. They're a part of the team. They represent the team. They're the face of the franchise. If he, as the face of this franchise, couldn't get this done, I think it would have been bad. I think he still might have stayed, but I think it would have been bad. But I think he feels pretty good today. I think he feels like he accomplished something. I really do. I think he feels like he came here and he elevated this franchise to a point where they had a little bit of a rocky go with Barclays, but now they're going to get a new dedicated home that's going to be all about them. And that's because of him. And he deserves to feel that way. And I'm not going to correct him. But I didn't expect an announcement today that he'd be signed. In fact, I wouldn't really expect one anytime soon. I think this is going to be a Stamkos situation. I think he is going to talk to other teams in that 5-day window that you get. But I think, this is good. I think Matthew Barzal is better, though. I think the fact that he's got Barzal now taking a little bit of heat off of him, and the fact that Josh Bailey has turned into the player that everybody hoped he would be for the last 10 years, finally. And Anders Lee seems to be unstoppable in front of the net. It's got to get you excited. I don't know how you walk away from a team like this. They're going to have a new building. They're going to offer you all the money you want, and they're on the rise competing for a playoff spot. I mean, where are you going to find a better situation, honestly? Unless you take a huge cut and sign with Pittsburgh. There's just no other better situation to get into. And again, Tavares is not playing behind, he's not going to play behind many people. Would he play behind Stamkos in Tampa? Maybe. That would depress me to no end, but he might. But he'd have to take a big cut to make that happen. And I don't think he's the kind of guy to do it because he is fiercely loyal. James O'Brien, a hockey analyst, notes hockey for NBC Sports, notes hockey analyst Jeremy Roenick, Keith Jones feel a lot better about Tavares re-signing with the Islanders after recent developments. He points out the chemistry between Tavares and Bailey and Anders Lee. Be a genius to come up with that. After all, I just did. He also believes the arena news is good for them. Bloppity, bloppity, blah, bippity, beepity. More on Jimmy Rutherford and the Pittsburgh Penguins coming from TribeLive.com reports that Rutherford said one reason he acquired Jamie Oleksiak yesterday from the Stars was the ability it gives him to make other deals. Now the defenseman could be on the way then. Could be on the move. If we were to move a defenseman going forward, I don't get locked into having to get a defenseman back, Rutherford said. I have more flexibility now. If the right forward's available, we can do that. Sounds like a defenseman for forward situation. Interesting. If Rutherford decides, according to The Athletic, if Rutherford decides to shop defenseman Josh Yeo or speculates it could be Ian Cole, a recent healthy scratch, Matt Hunwick, or Chad Ruedel, the acquisition of Oleksiak gives the Pens a legitimate NHL defensive contract. Bruce Garrick of the Ottawa Sun reports it's well documented Senators GM Pierre Dorion was working the phones over the last 10 days in search for his struggling roster. At the holiday trade fees, Dorion can continue to talk to other GMs, but won't be able to make a move until the freeze ends. That is the scary part about this. You can't make a move, but you can talk to other GMs, and a lot of deals are born during this break. Everybody gets a time to take a little breather. It's funny how a lot of deals are started in this little time frame. He could wait till January to see if he's going to do something. The Senators, I believe, are going to wait till far past January. I think they're going to wait till the deadline and they're just going to sell. That would be the smart thing. I think Dorion is totally in love with Matt Duchene, and the deal hasn't worked out so far. And I think what he's going to wind up doing is moving Erik Karlsson and building this team around Matt Duchene. It's just my feeling. He can get a whole ton of return back for Karlsson. He loves Duchene. If he can convince Duchene to sign, which, by the way, that's July 1st. July 1st, Duchene can re-sign because now he's in the last year of his deal. If he can convince Duchene to re-sign and build the team around him exactly how he wants it, then I think Karlsson will move out for a whole slew of pieces and prospects and everything else, and they'll start to build this team around Matt Duchene. All right, that'll be it for me. 7 o'clock here, so we'll get a lot of games in for the hockey action tonight. You got Toronto and Columbus coming up at 7:30, Detroit and Philly at 8, St. Louis and Calgary. So 3 games there. Detroit and Philly should be the national game. By the way, Detroit handled the Islanders last night. I was very impressed with their play. For a team that's in the middle of the rung there, they did super, super well. And Toronto, Columbus, although not going to be national for us here in the States on Sportsnet, you can get it in Canada. That, I think, will be the game of the night. That should be really, really good. Although it will be interesting to see St. Louis take on that one line for Calgary that's killing it over there. So that'll be a good game as well. 5 Live on this Wednesday. We're back tomorrow with another live show. We might try and inch these up a smidge earlier. Let me know in the comments how you feel about like a 3 or 4 o'clock start time for the show. I know it's cool to have this interaction live, but you'll still be able to watch it at 6 if you want. It'll still be online for you, and it'll still be on the podcast. But thinking about maybe an earlier start time for the show here, especially since next week I will be off from the radio, so I'll have a lot more time too. So I think we're really going to test that. If you hate it, let me know in the comments. If it's a little bit more convenient for you, let me know in the comments. Again, if you watch the replay and comment, I always comment back, so you'll always have the interaction with me here on the Hockey Talk Show. Get some savings on hockey gear. You only got a couple more days to order stuff before Christmas. We have links in the description below on Facebook and YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast, go to hockeytalkshow.com. Absolute pleasure hanging with you guys. Josh, Eddie V, everybody on Facebook. Thanks for the comments. Joey B from Isles Blog. Very cool. I'll put a link down below to his socials so you guys can connect with him over there at Isles Blog. They do a tremendous job on Twitter, and it was fun tonight.